So when I wrote the book proposal, I knew that I would have a chapter on physical activity because when you're on this expedition in Alaska for 33 days, you're going to be moving way more than you would in normal life. And so I could account for that. And I was already, embedded in sort of the fitness world. But there were other things that happened up there that I didn't necessarily expect. So for example, once I got up there, you're hundreds of miles away from civilization. And one of the more surprising things is just how freaking quiet it is up there. So you'd be standing on the tundra, and I remember this one time I just hear this, and I'm going like, what the hell is that? Like, what the hell is that? And it was my wristwatch because it's so quiet that the tick sort of gets amplified because there's no other sound around. And so that allowed me, that was surprising, but then that also sort of opened my eyes to think about, oh, wow, like the world is a lot louder than it probably was in the past. And how has that affected us? So it turns out that, the world is about fourfold louder now that humans have sort of taken it over. And all the noise we live in has had a lot of effects on our ability to focus, on our mental health in a lot of ways. It's even tied to physical health because living in too much noise effectively elevates stress levels. And that is one of the main risk factors in cardiovascular disease, for example. So there's just all these different ways that the world has changed. Some that I think are obvious to the average person, but some that are totally unobvious. And so my reasoning for sort of getting out of the office and going into some of these environments that are hard to get to is so I can really understand the topic better. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, the topic in nature is so interesting because like that's something like I think we all know that like getting into nature is so good for so many different reasons. And like bring up the example, like one of our like guys who's involved with Born Primitive Outdoors, his name's Aaron Snyder. He's like a prominent bow hunter. And like anytime I'm around Aaron and talk to the guy, and the dude is in the field like 200 days of the year. So that's how I'm getting, it'll come full circle here. But he's the most chill, relaxed, like seem balanced guy like I've probably ever met. But he's doing these like 3-week, 4-week elk hunts. He's just in British Columbia for I think 7 weeks in the mountains with no comms. You know what I mean? All they have was like a beacon to get the plane to come get them. They're 300 miles from any civilization. And it's like you can almost observe the effect that him being in nature has had on just his temperament, right? And so I guess for as far as nature specifically, what do you think like the key takeaways are? And how do we make that applicable to the everyday person? Because I've thought about this. Like, I want to start getting out west more, and I'm starting to try to come up with a plan. All right, in a year where I'm, a dad, full-time single dad, running a business, trying to be balanced with fitness and all these things. Like, what is an attainable goal for someone to get into nature? And what are the key benefits that you derive from doing your research?
Yeah, there's a pretty straightforward answer to this. So I definitely experienced the same thing that you're talking about with Aaron after I got back from the Arctic, where you just feel like when you're up there, you just feel super chill, super zen. You're just having, your thinking is clear. You're very focused. Even the way you think sort of changes after a certain amount of time in nature. And, being a journalist, it's like, all right, my job is to figure out, well, why is that? And so I ended up traveling to Boston and meeting with this neuroscientist. And she's researching this theory called the nature pyramid. And you can kind of think of it like the food pyramid, except instead of telling us, eat this many servings of grain and this many of vegetables or whatever, it tells people how much time you should spend in different types of nature. So you can think about this. I call it the 25-3 rule because that seems to resonate with people. It helps them remember the numbers. But it basically goes like this. So 20 minutes a day, 20 minutes, 3 times a week in the type of nature that you can find in like a city park or a really tree-lined street, that is associated with decreases in stress and increases in productivity. So then the next rung up is the 5, and that's 5 hours a month in the type of nature that, you might have a trail. It's a little more rugged, but it might be like a state park where like there's a parking lot and then you hit the trail, right? You're not super far removed. You probably still get self-service. So 5 hours a month in that type of nature is associated with increases in happiness and decreases in depression. And that's from a giant study out of Finland. And then at the top is 3 days, and that's 3 days in the backcountry. So this is the type of nature where, you probably don't get cell service. You have to hike in. So 3 days a year in that type of nature, it leads to some really interesting changes in the brain in that, in everyday life in the built environment, your brain rides what are called beta waves. So these are these sort of frenetic go, go, go waves. They're associated with stress and burnout and all these things. But after 3 days in the backcountry, people's brains start to ride what are called alpha waves. And these are the same waves that are found in experienced meditators. And they're associated with calm, with creativity, with just feelings of connectedness, like all these things that we want humans to have, right? So that provides sort of this week to month to year long framework for the average person to think, how can I get the most mental health benefits from nature? It's 20 minutes 3 times a week in nearby nature. It's 5 hours total a month in something like a state park, and it's spending at least 3 days sort of off the grid every year in the backcountry.